Welcome to the 2020 Lewis City Council Candidates Forum. I'm Amy Grace, a resident of Lewis and an officer of GLCC, the Greater Lewis Civic Coalition, which is sponsoring the event tonight. GLCC is a collection of residents of Lewis inside the city and outside the city on the side of Route 1. It is an honor for us to continue our tradition of bringing candidate forums to the community, even with this year's challenge of Zooming instead of being in person. Consequently, unfortunately, we won't be serving refreshments tonight. I'm sorry. Our goal this evening is to meet the 5 candidates who are running for office for 2 council seats, to hear from them about their plans and to be able to ask them questions. We will begin with candidates' opening statements at 5 minutes each. We'll be giving the speaker a 30-second warning at 4 minutes and 30 seconds when time is running out. To be fair to all, when time is up, we will let him or her finish their sentence, but then they must stop. There will be no audio or video of the audience tonight, but audience, you can be involved in this forum. You can ask questions at any time via Zoom's Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. You may address a question to a single candidate or multiple candidates or all candidates. Questions will be answered as they come in with some allowance for duplicates. All questions will be answered live. Because we are remote and we can't see you, audience, there are just a few little rules for submitting questions. 3 of them. 1, please try to keep your questions brief. A couple of sentences will be fine. Please mention whether you want your question to go to a specific candidate or to all candidates. And please include your first name and your neighborhood. To take as many questions as possible, response time will be limited to 2 minutes each. A question posed to a specific candidate can be answered by other candidates as well with a 1-minute allowance. We'll stop taking questions about 7:45 or earlier if all questions have been answered. At that time, each candidate may give a short, like 1-minute closing statement. As moderator, I might disappear from the screen briefly and occasionally to address any technical issues that arise, but don't despair, I will still be listening. Lastly, before we begin, I'd like to invite you to join GLCC. At $10 a year, it's a great value to stay in the loop. You can visit our Facebook page, Greater Lewis Civic Coalition, or email greaterlewis@gmail.com. And I'd also like to acknowledge and thank the other members of GLCC for their support and assistance in pulling off this event tonight. You guys are the greatest. I love working with you. Now, let's meet the candidates. First up, alphabetically, is Fred Buffet.
Thank you, Amy, and good evening to you watching this broadcast. And my thanks to the Civic Coalition for this opportunity to speak with you. Our country has been struggling with unexpected and unprecedented crises, a health crisis as well as an economic crisis. And unfortunately, many of you may still be vulnerable to the COVID-19 virus. As the nation and our city begin to journey to reopen, I assure you that my chief concern is your safety. I don't pretend to have all the answers as to how we'll get through these crises, but I know that we want to get our city back to normal, taking a course of action that keeps our city enduring and our community safe. Lewis is an efficient, well-run city, and I believe that I've made significant contributions to keeping Lewis moving forward. I have taken the lead in many instances and have vigorously supported initiatives that have made Lewis the special place we call home. I would be remiss not to acknowledge that a key reason our city is a special place is the involvement of the many citizens who volunteer their time and talents to the city committees and commissions, as well as community organizations. I certainly appreciate the contributions made by these volunteers. My 46 years of experiences as a professional engineer, a professor, and a college president, and more recently as a council member, enables me to be of influence in achieving the right solutions to protect the future of our city. My continuing commitment to you is to listen to all comments and ideas offered by members of the public, but be assured that I will not make decisions based on emotions. My decisions will be made based on facts and in line with our ordinances, as well as an evaluation of the effect on the future of Lewis. I will continue to weigh the pros and cons of each issue and make a judgment based upon the best long-term interests of Lewis. I believe the present council is best equipped to guide the city through the current crises, the pandemic, the economic situation, and the more recent social unrest that our nation is experiencing. It's important to keep Lewis on track to a healthy and vigorous future, and it must remain open and welcoming to all. Among the many issues facing the city, I believe two stand out: annexation and the current conflict with the Board of Public Works of the City of Lewis. Regarding annexation, the city has established 2 new zones in an effort to make annexation into the city more attractive to landowners while placing limitations on development. This was done in accordance with our 2015 comprehensive plan.
Fred, excuse me. Time. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much.
Our next candidate, Kay Carnahan.
Thank you. First, I want to thank the Greater Lewis Civic Coalition for hosting and moderating the forum, and thank you to all the residents who are connected to the Zoom broadcast. My name is Kay Carnahan, and I'm not running against anyone as much as I'm applying for a job on the City Council. My experience is the current member of the Volunteer Lewis Planning Commission since 2000 and an officer for almost 15 years. I've helped write zoning, subdivision, and sign ordinances, create 2 comprehensive land use plans. I've organized 2 water workshops. I've volunteered in numerous other city capacities: commercial architectural review, annexation committees, ad hoc committees, committee liaisons, and the inaugural Go Forth Fireworks Committee. I've worked on the City of Lewis's Board of Elections for several years. In 2019 alone, I was in 50 or so meetings and volunteered about 500 hours. So I am prepared for the workload ahead of me. I have strong listening skills and have experienced many high-pressure, standing room-only meetings, both chairman and vice chairman. Leadership means taking on the hard questions and making balanced decisions. It means putting others before self, and it means remembering what your purpose is, and welfare of the community. Here are areas of concern that I've gleaned from meeting with almost 65 citizens so far this election season. What I see as needing to change is essentially communication. Clear, open, honest communication is the best way to make decisions. Strong, confident, and able to listen and make compromise. Too much regarding city policy and action is happening in executive session. By reference, the City Council held 26 executive sessions in 2019 and so far in 2020. Too much is going on behind closed doors, and this becomes a trust issue. The city's legal budget in 2012 was $116,500. This year, in the report amended March 31st, the total is $4,000. This is a significant shift in emphasis. When appointed to the Planning Commission, I was trained by then City Manager Elaine Bisbee. Never do anything that causes a lawsuit, because then every resident of the city will pay for your mistake, literally. And that definition has stayed with me. Brings me to the City of Lewis BPW lawsuit. And because if elected, I would vote on this issue. I have read every word I could find on the subject. So far, I have seen no reason for this lawsuit. I can see no reason why the citizens should be footing a $310,000 legal bill. Recommendation is that a mediator be hired, 2 groups meet, and the issue be resolved. In an ideal world, I envision a different approach. Facts would have been explained to the public by the City Council, and a referendum would have confirmed the path forward. This would have been the perfect time to include everyone from the start. Ironically, in spite of that self-inflicted lawsuit, council decision-making of late uses fear of lawsuits as the driver. I'm a sunnier and more confident decision maker, understanding that every situation has boundaries of legal propriety, fairness, budget, and standards, but that the information within those boundaries, public opinion, spirited debate, and data should be the building blocks of the final analysis. I'm a positive, enthusiastic person who has no fear of hearing dissenting opinion or spending hours really listening to the public speak. That is how strong government functions. The City's Safer Future is the Hazard Mitigation Team's City Resiliency Plan. This will include components from city commissions and committees, DPW, and the protection of our critical infrastructure. I applaud the team and its vision and work ethic and support the development and implementation of such a plan. As our community recovers from the health and economic crisis, the city's budgetary status needs to be public so that residents and business owners can make informed decisions about their finances. Lewis has a history of being in a strong financial position, giving us an advantage as we face the challenge together. I look forward to the responsibility of City Council. I love Lewis and would consider it a privilege to be elected to maintain its stature as the first state.
Perfect. Thank you. Dennis Reardon is our next candidate to speak.
Thank you, Amy. Good evening, everyone. My name is Dennis Reardon, and I'm a member of City Council. Thank you to the GLCC for providing this forum, which is especially important given COVID-19 and the impact it's having on campaigning. I'm asking for your support to continue my work for you on City Council. Why? Because on your behalf, I want to keep working to improve Lewis while maintaining its unique and very special charm, character, and way of life. Lewis is an important part of who I am. I have been coming to Lewis all my life, have been a homeowner here for over 40 years, and a full-time resident since 2006. I also have deep roots and relationships in Delaware, having been born and raised in Wilmington. Prior to retiring in 2010, I spent 18 years as director of a residential educational program for developmentally disabled individuals with challenging behaviors. Before that, I served for 22 years in state government, primarily with family court as the chief commissioner, supervising commissioners, providing over civil matters and criminal trials. Through these management positions, I refined my management skills and the art of careful listening to all sides of the issues to make strong evidence-based decisions. For many years, before and since retiring, I have been an active civic volunteer serving on the Overfalls Foundation Board and the Mid-Delmarva Board of the Blood Bank and other agencies. When I made the decision to become involved in the city, I attended numerous meetings of City Council, the Board of Public Works, city budget meetings, streets committee, and others. I then served 1 year on the Planning Commission prior to my election to City Council in 2013. This deep dive prepared me for my work on City Council and was invaluable in letting me hit the ground running. The opportunity to make citizens' lives better is the best thing about being on City Council. I am proud to have initiated a number of projects throughout the city. Reassessment of all homes in Highland Acres, resulting in fairer taxes. Replacement of non-working streetlights at the entrance of Bay Breeze. The remodeling of the bathroom at Beach One, creating a year-round facility for the public. Replacement of the tax ditch pipe in Pilottown Village to correct the drainage issue. The installation of a stormwater pipe on Iowa Avenue to correct flooding. Designation of Bay Avenue and Neal's Alley as multimodal streets for the benefit of pedestrians and cyclists. City Council is much more than a monthly meeting. It involves working every day to understand challenges, gather citizen input, and come up with common sense, responsible solutions. As a member of City Council, I have served ex officio on the historic Lewis Byway Committee, the Lewis Planning Commission, the Parks and Recreation Commission, Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee, the Traffic Safety Advisory Committee, and others. I have also chaired and served on several city ad hoc committees, including the Beach Parking Committee, Property Review of Lewis Beach, and Annexation, and others. I have brought to City Council an approach of fiscal responsibility and careful, thoughtful decision-making. I have been an independent voice on City Council, always committed to protecting the history and character of Lewis, doing what is in the best interests of its citizens. I have demonstrated that I fully understand the time commitment and work ethic required to be an effective contributing member of council. I would like to continue to serve on council and would appreciate your vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next candidate to speak is Tim Ritzert.
Good evening, Lewis. I would like to start by thanking the Greater Lewis Civic Coalition for hosting this forum and for making this webinar available to the Lewis community during this COVID-19 affected time. My principal goal this evening is to demonstrate to you that I am knowledgeable of the issues facing Lewis government and how it operates. My knowledge is derived from years of living in Lewis and more recently from years of being a full-time resident, which has afforded me the opportunity to attend public mayor and council meetings, commission and committee meetings, including planning commission, budget, byways, and ad hoc meetings. I've also attended public BPW meetings. It's the cumulative effect from attending this spectrum of meetings that has given me the ability to witness a trend line that suggests a loss of vision and deteriorating regard of the citizens of Lewis. I would like to take this opportunity to pose a question. Is there anyone attending this meeting, anyone attending this meeting this evening who thinks that it was prudent to write into the zoning code a code that allows for high density housing in the form of townhouse community to be developed and constructed along the new road and the banks of Canary Creek? Under the leadership and stewardship of the incumbents, Fred and Dennis, the council has created the AX-RES code to allow for an 89 townhouse subdivision to be constructed on New Road. The AX-RES code is on the books and is available to any developer whose parcel is located along New Road and annexed. This code turns its back on the Lewis core values statement found in the city's comp plan, as well as the vision statement set forth in the Lewis comp plan for New Road, where it was suggested that single-family detached homes, or R2, was forecast to be the kind of development the city wanted along this gateway. We've been assured by council that the decision to approve a townhouse community was not for the short-term gain of additional transfer fees, and yet no other explanation has been forthcoming. I ask, where was the regard for the public's voice when shaping the special annexation codes? I am not suggesting that all decisions made by the council are flawed or bad. We have many examples of good, sound decision-making. And I would include in that the most recent reaction the council has made to the coronavirus threat. The quick adoption of Zoom technology, consulting with the medical field experts from the Beebe Hospital community to help shape a city response to the viral threat. Furthermore, the benefits of a city manager participating in state level discussions with the governor's office to shape local government decisions, which resulted in keeping everyone better informed and as safe as possible through emails sent by the city manager to residents. Another example would be the honorific renaming of 4th Street to Martin Luther King Way. And it's as an acknowledgement to the contributions the African-American community has made and continues to make to the Lewis community. There's also the recently formed African-American Historic Commission, which I believe really shows great vision and promise for everyone, all races, to better understand and appreciate the African-American contribution to the fabric that makes Lewis, Lewis. And of course, where would this community be without the benefit derived from the sweat and tears of many Lewis residents who are passionate about the city and give of themselves so willingly as volunteers on committees and commissions. With respect to my background, my career was in both the electric utility and telecommunications industries. Project design, project management, contracts management are the fields I have worked in professionally. I cannot offer the citizens of Lewis the benefit of a law school education or an advanced engineering degree. I have not been appointed to serve on committees and commissions. Instead, I'm a resident who got off the couch, retired the TV remote, and began to get involved by attending public civic meetings. And by attending meetings, I've become better informed, more involved in the Lewis community. I offer an approach to government that is rooted in humility, knowing that I do not know everything, nor do I have all the answers to all the problems and challenges facing this community. I'm committed to listening to citizens. I'm committed to communicating openly with citizens. I'm committed to cultivating a culture of transparency where a broad and diverse swath of citizens are at the table shaping policy and decisions. Thank you.
Tim. Thank you.
Thank you.
So sorry we can't see your face. And now, last but not least, Andrew Williams, candidate.
Thank you. I'd also like to thank the GLCC as well for organizing this forum and giving the candidates an opportunity to have an open dialogue with the community and each other. I would also like to give my appreciation to those that are able to participate tonight. You're demonstrating your love and concern for Lewis and your commitment to your neighbors and our future. So thank you. We're likely to cover a lot of ground tonight, so I'm sure we'll address a good number of the issues that we're facing here in Lewis. And I'll certainly summarize some of my positions before we get into the Q&A. But first, I want to give you a little bit more background on my connection to Lewis and why my wife and I chose to return here to raise our children and the motivation of running for council. I hope you'll get a better insight into my values and goals and the character of who you may be putting in a position to represent you. I have an amazing wife, Rita, who some of you may know is doing great work at BB and throughout the community. I also have two children, Keenan, who's 13, and Bodie, who's 10. You may have seen these guys walking to school or running around town or maybe playing music at Striper Bites. My family has lived in Lewis for several generations. My grandfather, James, as you know, founded BB over 100 years ago. My grandmother, Peg, graduated from high school from what's now the Lewis School, and my father, Ralph, was also raised here. He administered anesthesia at BB for over 35 years, perhaps to some of you. My mom, Bonnie, taught at the BB School of Nursing, and they raised me to never take more than you need, give more than is expected, and the service to others is more rewarding than the service to yourself. Rita was also raised in this area with similar values, and both of us attended CAPE. In short, we went away to college, got married, and started our careers and family in the New York area, and knew that eventually we'd be moving back to Lewis permanently at some point, probably to retire. However, as we've seen recently, there are events in your life that raise your awareness and prompt you to action. And for me, it was the conversation with my father that he had advanced cancer. He's doing well, by the way, but we processed this as a family. We realized the answer is that we can't let time pass us by. So we moved to Lewis so that we could provide support and ensure that our children were able to have the guiding influences of both my parents and Rita's parents, and essentially give them access to the same quality upbringing that we had growing up here. Time and opportunity are things we don't get back. We knew we might be sacrificing some potential career and material gains for ourselves by leaving New York, but realized the benefit that we could give others and the benefit our children would receive and their future would receive far outweighed the benefit to ourselves. So we took action. We moved back to Lewis with a lot of uncertainties regarding affordability of housing or how we would make a living here and how we would incorporate ourselves back into a town that had evolved over the time we had been away. So we have a unique position as people who were born here as well as people who have moved here, so we understand those challenges. As we've seen in particular this year on a local, national, and global scale, events and circumstances change, often quickly. And change isn't comfortable. These changes are necessary, however, and we need to be ready to adapt quickly and effectively while having an ability to communicate to those around you what needs to be done, how they can help you, and what you're doing in attempting to help them. We need to continue to educate ourselves more on the issues, and I'm speaking to all of us. We are representative government, and I'm committing to working diligently and thoroughly researching the issues, maintaining an open line of communication through the implementation of listening or office hours, in order that we can all work towards solutions together. So keep informing yourselves and get involved, because I intend to be available and eager to tap into the intelligence and talents that exist in this town. I welcome to hear from you now and going forward as to what you feel are key opportunities for Lewis. Although they are numerous, I want to touch on a few areas where I believe the city needs to consider new approaches. The first is addressing the way that we can more effectively support and grow our local economy through coordinated planning and a vision for what Lewis is going to look like in 10, 20, 50, or 100 years from now. Land use. The protection of the environment is one of, if not the pillar of Lewis uniqueness. The opportunity to be situated on Cape with its biodiversity and the challenge that face our environment through development or sea rise are myriad. Voting procedures and eligibility. Increased diversity, and to me this cuts across many angles: age, race, sexual orientation, socioeconomic background. We're privileged to live in Lewis, and we need to continue to build an inclusive community that allows us to thrive. Lastly, I wanted to mention as well that today is Juneteenth, and it's an important date to many of us in the community, and it's an important date to me. I just want to take that opportunity to mention that. Thank you.
Perfect timing. Thank you very much. We're now finished with this section, and the questions are pouring in. Thank you, everyone. I was afraid we wouldn't get any questions. So let's see. I think this is a question for all candidates from Elaine Summerman on West 4th Street. What are your suggestions for resolving the very expensive conflict between the City of Lewis and the Lewis Board of Public Works? Fred, we'll go back to alphabetical order and let you go first on that. I think your audio is off. We can't hear you.
There we go.
Okay.
The council has started negotiations with BPW to resolve our differences. And therefore, I think it would be inappropriate for me to try to make any comments. We've tried to work with BPW for the last 2 years, and we're very pleased that our legislators are getting involved in the process, and we're trying to move forward. So we're looking seriously for a solution. So that's where I would respond to the question.
And Kay Carnahan.
Thank you. In my opening statement, I really said, I think my answer was with such a major change in the core of how the city is structured, I really think a referendum would have been the way to go, to bring everyone in, inform everyone, and find out what's going on, rather than receiving mailings from some and not others, emails. There's been a lot of hard feeling, and I feel this is all unnecessary. I would have preferred a straight, inclusive approach from the very beginning. I think large changes to the way the city is set up need to be agreed on by as many people as possible. It needs to be inclusive.
Thank you. Dennis?
Everybody in the city was mailed a letter which explains the city's position. And I'm going to read part of that because I think it's very important. After decades of close cooperation, the relationship between the city and DPW has deteriorated. This is not due to personality conflicts or disputes over money, but instead due to a serious policy conflict. DPW wishes to expand its customer base and revenues by serving landowners outside the city. On behalf of Lewis citizens, the city seeks to control growth, influence development, and ensure that those using city services, like its utilities, share the cost of those services. The way to accomplish city's goals is to require landowners to sign pre-annexation agreements. DPW fears this requirement might cost its customers. The city proposes to merge the municipal utility systems operated by BPW, which the city owns, into the city structure, so that Lewis is just like every other city and town in Delaware. This action will not change the way BPW delivers utility services or give the city control over BPW revenues and accounts. Most importantly, this administrative consolidation would be seamless to taxpayers. The city charter specifies that the city is responsible for providing drinking water, sewer collection and treatment, electrical services, and stormwater management. Under a separate party charter, BPW is charged with operating the city's utility services for the benefit of the residents of Lewis. BPW's own charter makes clear that the city owns the utility services. Indeed, BPW does not dispute that it is a municipally owned public utility. Given that it is not a,
Excuse me, Tim.
currently, yeah,
We're at time.
okay. Could I have one sentence? Could I finish that?
Yes, sure. Dennis.
Okay. Currently, the city and BPW are engaged in meaningful discussions to resolve this issue, and I'm hopeful that will occur.
Thank you. Tim,
Would you please, Amy, repeat the question?
sure. What are your suggestions for resolving the very expensive conflict between the City of Lewis and the Lewis Board of Public Works?
Thank you for that. My first suggestion is I really believe in the power of mediation. And I believe in the power of bringing people with diverse opinions together and have an open dialogue. It concerns me that there apparently has been a conflict that was brewing between these two state chartered organizations, that is the City of Lewis and the Board of Public Works. And that conflict was not apparent to me. And I don't believe it was apparent to most people in the community that these two bodies were not able to, that there was a problem, that there was a conflict. So I would think that a good start would be bringing in mediators who are skilled in this area. I'm really pleased to know that both Ernie Lopez and Steve Smick have made the offer and have recently met with the two parties and in some effort to get this dialogue started. And I look forward to disclosure of what those discussions are leading towards. I believe that the state legislature had reason to create two organizations and create two charters, and there's no reason that the two bodies cannot resolve the differences and continue to work together.
Thank you very
They have
much.
shared interests.
Thank you. And Andrew,
My answer is going to be pretty succinct. It's a board of public works, so it's a public utility. So in my mind, there should be more public input into the way this is going to be handled going forward.
thank you. We'll move to another question. This is from Doug Spellman. It's addressed to all candidates. The Sussex County Comprehensive Plan map designates New Road as low density. Are you willing to place a moratorium on new applications, permits, until the until the zoning can be corrected? The current zoning allows townhomes to be built on all property annexed by the city, all the way up and down New Road. This time we'll go first with Kay. Actually, Kay.
Thank you. I need to recuse from the actual Lewis Waterfront Preserve. This is an issue of great interest to virtually everyone I spoke to. Citizens are very unhappy with the development that has been allowed to go on. I think we should relook at those two, AX zones because the citizens of the city are not pleased with the results. They're scared, they're angry, and I think this needs to be addressed. So I don't know if a moratorium is the way to go, but I do know that those need to be addressed as a vision process.
Thank you. Dennis, your comments?
Amy, if you don't mind, would you please repeat the question? I missed a little bit in there, right between the county and the city.
Sure, it was rather long. The Sussex County Comprehensive Plan map designates New Road as low density. Are you willing to place a moratorium on new applications permits until the zoning can be corrected? The current zoning allows townhomes to be built on all properties annexed by the city all the way up and down New Road.
As a matter of clarification, I'd start by saying that the county comprehensive plan has no jurisdiction in land inside the city of Lewis. And maybe I could explain the way that annexation occurs in the city. City can only annex property that is contiguous to the city. And this may also answer some of Tim Richards' question that he asked in his comments, that recognizing that development is going to occur, in the 2015 comp plan, the city addressed the need for annexation and recommended the city become proactive in this regard to have greater control over development. It further recommended that incentives be offered to developers encouraging small lot sizes, creating greater open space. An annexation committee was formed which recommended 2 annexation zoning districts. The Lewis Planning Commission reviewed the new zoning districts and unanimously recommended council approve them. A public hearing was held, after which council unanimously adopted the zoning districts. It wasn't Fred, it wasn't Dennis, it was a result from the comp plan. As it relates to the Brittingham property, the density permitted by the city is less than is permitted by the county. And if you look farther up New Road, the county has approved 295 single-family homes with 10% open space on the Groom Church property. So it's not in our jurisdiction. What's in our jurisdiction we can do? And if there's a need for the zoning districts in the city of Lewis to be modified, there's a way to do that, but it was with the consent in relation to the comp plan and with the consent of council. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Andrew, to that question?
Sure. So there's 2 things mentioned there, which is the existing code and also the comp plan. And as I also mentioned in my introduction, things and situations change, and sometimes we have to be ready to react to those changes, and sometimes those changes come quickly and sometimes they take longer. This is one, as Kay mentioned, that seems to be of great concern to a large portion of the community, and it's probably worth Lewis taking a look at and reviewing the codes and whether they match. And the fact that they don't match with the county indicates to me that perhaps the communication and the need to have those 2 things better aligned aren't there. So that would, to me, be a reason that we need to potentially examine both the comp plan and the codes. And in reviewing both of those, you may have to put a pause on things, because I think the consensus is that we need to examine them.
Thank you.
Amy, for some reason, I can't get back in on the video.
You can hear us but not see.
I can hear you, but I can't get back in. It says the host has stopped it.
I didn't do it.
I know, somehow I got out. I got shut out, and then I tried to get back in. So I'll go by voice.
Okay.
And Amy, I think I'm supposed to also speak to this question.
I'm sorry. Yes, please.
Thank you. It's a good question. The question about a moratorium has legal implications that I cannot speak to. I would have to defer to a land use attorney. Hopefully the city solicitor would be able to advise us on the consequences of an action called, a moratorium. But more importantly, or as important, I think, is that we deal with what the facts are and what they were at the time that the Brittingham parcel was annexed into the city. And it was through the annexation through the action of annexation, and that was what's considered a friendly annexation, that the AX-RES zoning district was applied to that parcel. And that allowed for the 89 townhome plan to be developed for that approximately 33-acre parcel of land. Under the county plan, that same parcel, and it was in the county prior to annexation, it was zoned AR1. And as a matter of right, the property owner could have developed that, subdivided the land, and developed it with 3/4 acre lots. That's not a full acre, which would have come out to approximately 24 to 25 homes could have been constructed on that parcel, single family detached homes. So we have a delta between 25 single family detached homes and 89 townhomes being constructed on that parcel. The Groom Church parcel, that issue is not as clear as Dennis would have us believe, because in fact that parcel has now been, the developer has signed a pre-annexation agreement with the city. So that is in place for that parcel to be annexed into the city if and when a certain metric is satisfied. So those 295 homes that will be constructed under county code, not compliant with city building code, will in fact eventually could become part of the city of Lewis.
And thank you. That was a good last sentence. Nice long sentence.
Thank you.
Amy, I'd like to reply, please. Tim, you have misspoken regarding the potential for the county to develop that land. And as I said before, the county could have put 130, I didn't say it before, but they could have put many more townhomes on that lot, and townhomes could be permitted there. And as far as the Groove property, to my knowledge, there is no pre-annexation agreement signed, and that's as of about a week ago in conversation with Glenn Mandalis, the city solicitor.
I'd like to respond to that, please.
Amy, I thought,
You have a minute, Tim.
Yes, first of all, I do not have any inside information. The information I have about the status of a pre-annexation agreement for the Groom Church came to me, I believe, through either a reading of an article in the Cape Gazette or from attending a public meeting of city government here. I have not fabricated that. I heard it. And in fact, I think that was reported in the Cape Gazette. And this would have been, as I recall, it came during this past winter, before the COVID concerns. But I do know that it was reported that there was a pre-annexation agreement with the developer. The original developer for that property has flipped the property, has sold it to another party, and it is that party who has entered it, what was reported, has entered into a pre-annexation agreement.
Thank you, Tim. That's your time.
Thank you.
Andy, I didn't have my first shot at the question. You started with K.
Excuse me. Please go ahead.
There's a lot of misinformation. When the annexation committee was working, we worked for 17 months. We had public hearings, and there was no objections when we were talking about townhouses. Townhouses are not new to Lewis. We've got a number of developments with townhouses. The annexation and the site plan have been approved by council. And I have to tell you that with the county, that a developer can pay an extra fee and he can build townhouses, and the county would have allowed up to 138. So it's misinformation to say that the county would not allow townhouses. Let me give you an example. On Gills Neck Road, there's a 7-acre plot in the county. The county approved 24 townhouses. That, if you equate that to the Brittingham property, that's about 118 townhouses. So you have to keep in mind that the county does allow townhouses and the city has had more restrictions. And as far as we know, the city, while we offered to have a pre-annexation agreement, the city has no signed agreement, and we haven't heard from the developer for several months, as far as I know. So there's just misinformation, and I don't think that the problem is really townhouses, because the city allows them throughout the city under certain conditions. And so they're not new for the city. And so why would we exempt one area from having townhouses when we can have them elsewhere? Thank you.
Can I respond to that?
Yes, Andrew.
Please.
I think part of what you just said there is around why can one area have them versus another, and that speaks to the environmental impact zones. So that's where I'm saying that we need to look more carefully at where we allow certain things. Thank you.
If I may respond to Andrew,
You
keep
have a
in
minute.
mind that the city's requirement requires a lot more open space than the county. We've required 50% of the property be open space on Brittingham. The county doesn't come close to that. And we worry about the environmental impact, and we looked into that. So it's not, it wasn't ignored, believe me. Thank
And
you.
may I make one statement?
Yes, you have a minute.
Planning Commission did indeed answer the question that was asked about these zones, which was, do they follow the standards that were given? The question for Planning Commission is never, do you like them? Do you think this is a good idea? This is not asked. I mean, I as a member of Planning Commission, we didn't know why we were not tasked with creating these zones, because this is our expertise, and we are used to including the public, having a lot of public workshops, and trying to work with the public to get everyone's comfort level higher than it has been with these projects. And that, I think, is what we need to recognize, is people are uncomfortable. Thank you.
Amy,
I'd like to
can I
make one
respond to
last-
that? Hey, can I make a comment on that?
Dennis?
Yes.
Yes, 1 minute.
Okay, you mentioned that you weren't tasked with developing them, but they were presented to the Planning Commission for review and comment, and the Planning Commission unanimously approved the 2 zoning districts. Thank you.
With comments,
Yeah, I'd like to comment to this, please. Clarify 2 things. First of all, under county development, under their code, the single-family detached homes that would have been built on Brittingham parcel would have been by right, and any townhouse community built on that same parcel would have been called conditional use. And we do not know what the county would have decided about an application for conditional use, because in fact, the applicant, the developer, never talked to the county, never applied to develop under the county code. I will also speak to the point that Kay just made, and the record, the meeting minutes record show very clearly that the Planning Commission was given a total of 90 days to review and comment on the AX districts, zoning districts. And Kay can speak to workload and speak to the level of review that is possible in a 90-day period. I can't speak to that.
And thank you. I think in deference to other questioners, we should move on to another issue. Next question posed by John Kiker, Pilot Town Road, says, What is your position on continuing to build, develop in the floodplains around Lewis? This time we'll start first with Dennis.
We have ordinances regarding development within the floodplains. It's a very challenging situation, and we want to try to minimize the density in those developments. There are many homes in the city of Lewis that are on floodplains, and there are restrictions on what you do there, and they have to be in compliance with them for the safety of the folks.
Tim.
Would you please repeat that question?
Sure. What is your position on continuing to build, develop in the floodplains in and around Lewis?
I have great concern about allowing or continuing to allow development in floodplains. And part of my answer is based on the fact that I am not an expert in this area. I'm not an expert in agronomy, and I have a healthy respect for what scientists and engineers, but primarily scientists, what they would advise us to do in and around floodplains.
Thank you. Andrew, same question.
My answer somewhat mirrors Tim. I think as evidenced by the council sending the previous, before COVID, previous development back to the Planning Commission, it shows that they're difficult properties to develop. And to Tim's point, I think we need to look at the inclusion of flood studies prior to properties getting to a certain level of even consideration, so that the developers as well can understand what are they able to work with or not. So I think to Tim's point, we have access to environmental experts right here in Lewis. So I think that we should be leveraging them more. University of Delaware, DENREC, and we should be bringing their opinions in terms of how we are shaping our developable land going forward.
Thank you. Fred, you're next.
Well, I think first we need to keep in mind that there's very little developable land in Lewis. We don't go out and encourage people to develop in the floodplain. We have ordinances that somewhat control what they can do. And within the surrounding county that's contiguous or near contiguous with Lewis, there's very few floodplains. But I think the important thing is, as Dennis says, we do have ordinances, we do watch it, and there have been, the Planning Commission has certainly been concerned with and looking at that issue. And I think it is always an issue that we're willing to discuss. But I think the main thing is there's only about 1 or 2 large properties in Lewis that are developable. And so we don't want to try to make an issue that may not exist. Now, wetlands are different. We do have wetlands. We do have controls on how we protect our wetland. And I know that the Planning Commission is looking at the idea of protecting the wetlands. So that's probably more of an issue for Lewis at this point than anything. What's currently built and is coming into floodplains, we can't tell the people that they have to do something different. And so we'll have to try to figure out how to contend with that issue. But that's a little different issue than the question was asked. Thank you.
Thank you. And Kay, on that question?
Thank you. Well, this is certainly something of vital interest to both the Planning Commission and obviously the proposed city resiliency plan by the hazard mitigation team. We have teams working on floodplain ordinances, sea level rise ordinances, and wetland buffer ordinances with the Planning Commission. And those will be coming up to Zoom public hearings shortly. We were hoping they would be in person, but it looks like they will be Zoom. Certainly, Newcastle County has far more restrictive building in the floodplain ordinances than we do. We have heard much concern from citizens, from residents. I got a furious phone call from someone who bought property in what was formerly called Point Farm, adjacent to Canary Creek. When he read articles in the Cape Gazette to discover the amount of discussion that Planning Commission had with it, he was furious that he had purchased a lot there. So citizens in this community are very smart on all of these subjects. I mean, we had 130 people come to a water workshop on a February afternoon. So people are much smarter than the citizens of Lewis, and they expect a lot of us. They expect us to protect the property and to protect purchasers who have no idea what they're getting into. So I think you'll see Planning Commission and Hazard Mitigation Team coming up with much stronger ordinances on floodplain, sea level rise, and buffers in general.
Thank you.
Amy, if I may comment, we have the Fisher's Cove before us, and floodplain is an issue. It's an issue for Planning Commission, has been an issue for council. So it's not that we have not paid attention to that issue. We are concerned very about that.
And if I could say one more thing, we had a study done by AECOM regarding properties in that area. And I would encourage the public to go back and read that study. When I read the study, I mean, your hair stands on end. The conclusions were very sort of much too relaxed from my perspective, but the study itself is excellent, provides excellent information on what we have and where the city is going.
Thank you. Moving on to the next question, a little different, from Rick Moore. What are your thoughts about Juneteenth related to Lewis? This time we'll start with Tim.
That is a great question. Very good question. You know, I was thinking about this very matter during the day today. This is I have just learned very recently, within the last 48 hours, within the last 7 days, the historical significance of this day. I'm not proud of the fact that I was not knowledgeable. I like to think that I am an informed person, but this is a part of our country's cultural and ethnic background that I had no knowledge of, and I can only hope that my awareness is reflected in the entire community, and that we will, going forward, find a way to celebrate this day in an ecumenical way, that people of all races can join in this and celebrate it. But I apologize, I was not well informed, and I did not know the historical significance of it.
Thank you. Andrew?
Yeah, I know June 19th is Juneteenth because today's my birthday also. So it is a significant date. And as you know, frankly, in the environment, the recent events, it's probably been raised to a lot of other people's awareness. And I think that Lewis should do more as a community. This isn't on council or anyone, but as a community, we should be doing more to promote all types of diversity and acceptance. And I would like to see as a future, as maybe marking this and having as an event that as a community of Lewis, that we have that as marked as an important date, and we could do something as a community going forward that remembers it, and then tie in all that it means. One, the shameful past of what it represents, and the reminder that there are still people that are still struggling for their freedom now, and that as a community, we need to bring them along. Thank you.
Thank you. Fred?
I think it's unfortunate that a lot of people were surprised the other day when our governor announced this as a holiday, because they didn't understand or realize what Juneteenth was. Now that we know, I believe the governor and the state will probably declare it a holiday. And I believe that our African American Heritage Commission will very likely take up this issue and make recommendations to the city as to how we might recognize the holiday. As it's been said, it is important. I don't know that our citizenry recognized or realized or remembered how important it is. But this is an opportunity that the council will have, and I'm sure we'll be looking to the African American Heritage Commission to give us some recommendations as to how we might look to celebrate this this holiday. And so, if given a chance to serve on the to remain on council, I would look forward to hearing from them as to what their recommendations would be.
Thank you. Kay?
Well, I think one of the interesting things about the city is if you look at the Sanborn insurance maps, you can see how this community has changed and developed. One of our core values is Lewis is a community of diversity. And this, I think, has become more aspirational than anything. And I can't really legislate diversity. You can be and support it. So I would hope on a holiday like this, and really anytime, people look at those maps and see the difference. I mean, why is there Beach 1 and Beach 2? You know, this is all part of the heritage of this community and every community. I will say, in connection with this, I don't know why it took 2 years to redesignate 4th Street. I was at the meeting where it was first. I thought, well, of course, I grew up in Wilmington, and I think it was done in 1989. And it's an exit on I-95, for heaven's sakes. So I was mortified last fall to discover that it had not progressed. I'm grateful that it has. It's woken all of us up. If we want to go with this core value of diversity, well, then we have to work for it. And this is an annual reminder that we're supposed to be a diverse community.
Thank you. Dennis?
I agree with all the speakers. I won't go into repeating all of that. And I fully support celebrating Juneteenth and agree with the governor's decision to recognize it as a holiday and the city's decision to recognize it as a city holiday. And I hope we continue to do these things.
Thank you. The next question is directed to Tim Ritzert from Gail Van Gilder. Tim, you stand for communication, accountability, and transparency. You had a very informative letter in the Cape Gazette today on the large number of City Council Executive Committee meetings held behind closed doors. What would you do differently? 2 minutes for Tim.
Has the clock started? Thank you for that question, Gail. I will, I might jump around in this answer, but I hope to address all 3 components there, please. First of all, I think that we should, I'm encouraged the improvements that have been made recently during the last 120 days with the introduction the city has made of using Zoom and that type of technology to continue to do business, but do it and allow the public to participate in government meetings without having to go to City Hall to participate. It's not perfect, but it is it is a step forward. And I am hopeful that this is the beginning of our city government beginning to embrace more electronic mediums to be able to communicate effectively and in a timely manner with the citizens. The business of accountability for me is a huge component of my is the cornerstone of my candidacy. And I believe that there is accountability that is the responsibility of our city elected officials and city staff to the citizens. But there's also an accountability that we, the citizens, have to those elected officials and to the city staff. And that is where we hold each other in account for our actions and our inactions. I think too often we just kind of look the other way and let things slide, and that's nice and it's polite, but it might not be getting the job done. And to the extent that we can hold each other accountable, I think that would be helpful. The transparency issue is my belief, my firm belief, that our democracy in this town, our democracy in the state, our democracy in the country is dependent upon as much business being done in front of the public as possible.
Tim, thank you. You're out of time.
Can I make a comment?
Yes, you have 1 minute.
So I agree with Tim that it was refreshing to see that the city adapted to bring in Zoom. However, my demographic works, and the council very quickly adopted a 2 o'clock Zoom meeting once we were in the COVID, assuming that, yeah, people were home. However, it didn't take into account the fact that people were continuing to work. People of my demographic were continuing to work, and therefore this idea of having input and having transparency was not available to some.
May I make a comment?
Yes, you may.
I think it's important for everyone to understand that executive sessions have very strict requirements. You can only have an executive session for issues regarding litigation, personnel issues, contract issues, which would not be appropriate to be conducted by the city in a public hearing. And it could be very well detrimental to the people that are involved in it. There's no secrecy. There's no lack of transparency. These are strict rules that we must follow in an executive session.
If
May
I
I make a
might,
com-
if
go
I
ahead.
might, Amy,
Go ahead, Fred. Go ahead.
I think it's important to know that the executive sessions are not held in order to keep secrets or to keep the citizens in the dark. Dennis is right. There are legal reasons for having to have executive sessions. And if you look at what's going on since 2018 between the city and the BPW and the BPW suing the city, we had to spend a lot of time trying to sort out the legal issues that were involved. And so I think it's also important to know that the council has open meetings, committees have open meetings, we have public hearings. There's not a transparency issue. We are bound by the laws. We have an attorney that tells us what we can and can't do. And so I think you have to give the council credit. We do communicate and we're open, and our council meetings, people are welcome to speak up. And so I think we need to look at the constraints that council has on them. Thank you.
And Kay, you had a comment?
Yes, please. I just think that there have been an extraordinary amount of executive sessions. I spoke to one former city official who said the ideal number a year is 2. I think this shows a real way that this council is so focused inward on legal issues rather than behind the ideal of taking some of the many plans that exist that are much more visionary into the future and start enacting them and working outward rather than this inward focus. I think it has definitely become a crisis figure for many people that I've spoken to.
Thank you. We'll move on to another question that's directed to Dennis. Do you currently and/or still support the city's efforts to realign the streets to accommodate the installation of dedicated vehicle parking spaces in the historic residential neighborhood of Lewis Beach? Do you believe this will permanently change the character of the Lewis Beach neighborhood?
Amy, could you please repeat that question?
It was long. It's from Mark Schaefer on New York Avenue. Do you currently and/or still support the city's efforts to realign the streets to accommodate the installation of dedicated vehicle parking spaces in the historic residential neighborhood of Lewis Beach? Do you believe this will permanently change the character of the Lewis Beach neighborhood?
Well, first of all, there's only one block on Lewis Beach that is historical, and that's Market Street between Cedar and Bay. Secondly, we're not realigning the streets to provide parking. On Lewis Beach, many of these streets were put in place before there were any requirements, rules and regulations on streets. For instance, I live on Oregon Avenue. And if you drive up Oregon Avenue, the paved surface is a 50-foot right-of-way. On the left-hand side, on the west side, there's about 4 feet of right-of-way. On the right-hand side, there's probably about 22 feet. The same situation exists on Kentucky Avenue and many other streets in Lewis. There is not an effort to create more parking. As a matter of fact, when we had the beach parking committee, we eliminated parking places on Lewis Beach. When you go to the end of a side street like Oregon Avenue and you come to Cedar, on the left and right hand side, we eliminated 30 feet of parking space on both of them, and that is on both sides of Cedar Street. We also eliminated on 7 streets, parking on one side because they were narrow. So I'm not sure, we're not trying to create parking on Lewis Beach. We're trying to control it. We're trying to designate where the right-of-way is so we can assure that people are not encroaching in it to prevent parking. And we're just trying to be fair and see where we are.
Amy, if I could support Dennis and what he said, I chaired the beach parking committee. We have never thought about realigning the connector streets between Cedar and Bay. That is simply not on the books. We simply wanted to know where the right-of-ways were because the streets are not in the middle of the right-of-way. As Dennis has said, they're skewed. Most every street is skewed. And we have a problem with people parking in residence yards, and we were trying to see what kind of a problem that was. So there is no intention of realigning the streets, period.
I'd like to comment because I have one of those houses where people park in the yards. My family has a house on Rhode Island Avenue, which is supposed to be deemed emergency access. And I was on the beach one day when an ambulance was not able to get through due to the people and how they park there. So regardless of the position, Lewis Beach parking needs examination. And that's something that needs to be taken on.
And may I comment?
Amy, could I comment on Andrew's comment? Andrew, on Rhode Island Avenue, council has approved no parking on one side so that those vehicles can get up the street. We're just waiting for the signs to be put up.
Okay, can you put up the signs too about people, that still eliminates the driveways and things as well? I think it needs to be an issue that we look at a little bit further.
Kay,
I,
you had a comment?
And if I could comment on that, I heard quite a bit about things on Lewis Beach. I didn't really hear consensus, other than I heard some people would like to have a public bathroom, some people would not. Some people are very upset about the amount of construction of very large homes, some are not. Most people are upset about parking. And I think at this point, it could hurt to have a public workshop and get some consensus, because we can't really move forward with any kind of decision until we hear exactly what's going on and get a good gauge for like a public bathroom. Is that needed? I don't know. We need to ask the residents who are there and who see what goes on all the time. Can you really expect to have public beaches with no bathroom? Yet who wants to live next to a public bathroom? So we need to discuss these things to come up with, I think, a plan for that part of the city.
if I may respond,
Yes, Dennis, 1 minute.
when Jim Ford was mayor, there was a public meeting and discussion about additional bathrooms on Lewis Beach. They were talking about putting porta potties on some of the paper streets, and it damn near caused a revolution. And everybody backed away. And as far as public meetings, the Beach Parking Committee had many public meetings. Mr. Schaefer was present for a couple. There was a lot of input. And one gentleman on the beach did a survey of the residents of the beach. And there was very little complaint about the parking. Parking is a problem in every coastal town from Broadkill to Fenwick Island, and everyone has the same issue. There's more cars than there are parking spaces, and that's a given. How we deal with that, I'm not really sure. We've tried, we're looking for input. Anybody has suggestions, throw them out here.
Okay, I'm moving on to the next question, which is directed to Kay. The city council is made up of 5 voting members. Your recusal due to a conflict of interest on the Planning Commission greatly impacted the Brittingham Lewis Waterfront Preserve project. Can you address your prospects for a recusal that could leave the city council with a 4-vote stalemate? Since developments are an issue, won't a realtor have a conflict of interest often?
Thank you. Let me just be clear at the beginning, which is that I'm not a realtor. I do not have a license. I do not work with builders, developers. I only work with in-house agents. So the reason I recuse is for a reason such as my company lists a property. And in a community this small, most of us have to recuse at some time for some reason. I understand that it has much more impact on a 5-member council than on a 9-member council that I'm on now. And at the moment, and speaking with the city solicitor, I will only have to recuse on one project that is currently in discussions. So I'm hoping to keep it to an absolute minimum. I understand the impact of it. I never want to recuse. I only recuse when I feel I must and I should. And everyone should do that. It's very important. So I hope to keep it to an absolute minimum because I understand it.
This question, by the way, was from Nick DiCerchio.
Thank you.
We'll move on. Also from Nick is a question for Fred. Since unchecked development and infrastructure deterioration are concerns of many citizens, do you oppose a comprehensive plan for dealing with these issues in accordance with residents' concerns?
I'm not sure I understand the question, but no, I don't oppose that. And I think that the issues of infrastructure are serious issues for the council. And we certainly deal with it every time we have budget planning, because the streets need to be resurface frequently every now and then. Some of them that belong in, that the city now has are not up to city standards. And it's very expensive to sort of redo the streets, but I don't have a problem with that. It is an issue that the council constantly is wrestling with because it is very expensive in terms of capital outlay. And Dennis may like to make some comment too, in the sense that it is an issue for council.
I would just concur with your remarks, Fred.
And if I could say something, I will also say that whenever I have had a question about anything to do with infrastructure, I have always found it available, extremely helpful. I had a lot of comments and questions, particularly from the wastewater treatment plant malfunction and other issues that from people that I spoke with, that I took to Darren, who was available immediately and very helpful. So I think that people should feel comfortable contacting him with questions, because I think that he will provide what information you need.
I think Kay is right. That's a BPW issue in terms of the utilities. The city does not have any involvement at this point with that, because BPW assumes itself to be independent of the city. And that's a BPW issue at this point, not a city issue for the utilities.
Let's see if we can get some more questions in here. Carol Ann Palla writes, as a citizen, I am concerned about the release of sewage into the bay. How do we know it won't happen again?
Could I answer that question?
It's to everybody. So yes, Kay, you can go first.
And like I just said, I went to Darren with, quite frankly, 10 phone calls in about 3 days with questions that people gave me. I will say the community has a great deal of angst and distrust after the accident. I'm hoping that they read the report that the BPW members wrote afterwards. I'm hoping the BPW members don't make an appointment to check in on how the plant is doing. I hope they just show up and make sure that all of the settings are correct, all of the alarms are on, everyone is doing their job. I also hope that they're doing the same with our electrical grid, with our water supply, with all of these things, that all of that, this was a wake-up call, and that all of it is being managed as it should be and as we trust them to. I would think that BPW needs to reach out to the citizens continuously to reassure them about that. People are angry about it.
Here's one from Mary Woods on Ship Carpenter Square. It's to Fred and Dennis. There are several dangerous places where bike paths cross heavily trafficked areas on Savannah Road and Kings Highway with no traffic signals or stop signs. In the Savannah Road bike lane, cars often park or use the bike lane as a turning lane or to bypass turning cars, creating a very unsafe situation for bikers. Why haven't you addressed these issues when improvements were made?
Well, first, we have a bike and pedestrian commission that does address these issues, and the council takes seriously their recommendation. Dennis and I were quite heavily involved in East Savannah Road because of that very thing, that we only had a 2-foot wide strip going from the beach to town where children and adults as well were on their bikes on Savannah Road. As a consequence, we tried to address that issue. We narrowed the lanes. We worked with DelDOT, then we worked with DNREC. We narrowed the traffic lanes. We widened the bike paths. You can't, I don't know how you stop motorists from moving over into the right lane to make a turn except through the police. And you have to be there and see when it happens. Along Kings Highway and Savannah Road, keep in mind they are state roads. And for the city to be able to put stop signs up or traffic lights, we would have to have the state's permission. And so you have to look at the situation and the conditions, and you have to put some responsibility on the bikers to practice good safety and take advantage of the crosswalks rather than just darting out into traffic. But we do have constraints, and those two main streets are state streets, and the city doesn't keep them, isn't responsible. So any sort of traffic control, we have to get the state to take on the issue for us. Dennis, you?
Yeah, I concur with your remarks, Fred, and keep in mind that these discussions occurred with DelDOT regarding the turn lanes, and DelDOT had the final say, and they have done what they've done, and it's really up to the people on the road to be courteous and share the road, the bicyclists and the motorists, and it's a situation that exists.
Here's an issue for everyone from Tom. The economic viability of Lewis will be challenged over the next 50+ years by climate change and the subsequent sea level rise and storm intensity. Can each of you speak in general about how you view this issue and provide some specific actions that you think can be taken to mitigate the impacts on the health, safety, and economics to the citizens?
May I answer that one?
Yes.
I think this is right on the money. I think these are very difficult discussions to have. There's nothing scarier than the thought of retreat. No one wants it to come to that. So I think this is a critical time when the city needs to do the brave work of saying, how can we keep as much as we have as far as land and homes? How can we keep as many of those as we can for as long as we can? How can we keep people safe for as long as we can? All you have to do is look at Cape Hatteras after these spring storms, and you see the power. So that, I think, is the main thing that we can do, is to accept that, yes, the coast is heading this way, and we need to do what we can do, and to be honest and clear, not scary, not outlandish, but to focus on those issues, inform people, and work together to come up with plans so that we know best how to approach situations, like, say, through using Rascal and other professionals out there who can help us come up with a plan to deal with what's coming.
I'd like to add on as well. I kind of, in the beginning of my introduction, mentioned that we should be tapping into the resources that we have. So right here, again, we have environmental scientists, and we have folks that have the expertise to help us plan for this. Tim had kind of mentioned in his opening too that he doesn't have all the expertise, and I feel the same way. I'm not coming into this with the idea that I'm going to come with the solutions, but it's first recognizing, as Kay said, that there's an issue. Who can we turn to that could provide expert planning that we could then adopt as a city as a plan going forward?
And I will add that sea level rise and storm surge are certainly huge issues and affect the economic impact and the building in the city. These issues are being reviewed by the Planning Commission subcommittees. They're also being reviewed by the mitigation planning team. And they do bring in the expertise of other state agencies. And it's a real problem that we have coming down the pike. And we need to bring in every available resource to help us figure out a plan going forward.
Anyone else?
I will add, this is Tim speaking.
One thing we've been working on also with Planning Commission to realize is that sometimes when historic homes are modified to prepare it for, say, sea level rise, the home then loses its historic designation. So this is a National Park Service issue. So I know that there are committees and groups that are working on coming up with a way to solve this issue too, so that you can remain in a historic home that is recognized as such, but that has been adapted to our current conditions.
Tim, you have a minute on this question.
Thank you. My response would be quite brief, actually. And that is, it's just a reminder that as elected members to the council, we are charged with the responsibility of the health and safety of our community. We cannot hide our heads in the sand. We cannot wish this problem away. We have got to deal with the facts and plan accordingly. And plan accordingly based upon what the science tells us, what the science is teaching us, and not be afraid to begin to execute a plan. Thank you.
I would simply say that the council and the planning commission have turned to experts. We always look for the expert to help us, because this takes a bit of a crystal ball to know what's going to happen in 50 years or whenever. But we also have to keep reality in focus. It is not an easy fix. It's a very difficult and complex problem. And the council is, in fact, constantly aware of the problems. It's easy to define the problems. Finding the right answers for a small community is very, very difficult and elusive. And so the council does take seriously predictions, and we are constantly looking with the planning commission for answers.
Let's try to get a couple more questions in before we run out of time. We have many, many questions. I'm just looking for ones with a different take. This is from Ron and Susan Cohen in Cape Shores. Would each of the candidates please disclose any financial or personal ties that could lead to any conflicts of interest, especially as it concerns proposals for new development?
I have none. Yeah.
I think we're required by law to, at least when I first came on council, I had to sign some documents and indicate if I had any conflicts of interest that they had to be shown. So I've not had any.
I do not have any association with anyone. So all I own in Lewis is my house.
No.
This is Tim speaking. I don't have any personal conflict at all or financial interest in any businesses here.
I'm employed by a real estate company in this area, and my husband is a wetlands delineator in this area. If there are any, I make them known to our legal counsel and to my chairman.
Here's a question from Rick Moore. How would you attract younger residents with children to Lewis?
I could answer that. I think one thing we have to offer more diversity of jobs. So that touched on probably a longer term plan, obviously, but that would be one. You have to give them an attractive place to make a living, because I think we can appreciate that. That's, if you have a family, that's how you provide for them. I'm fortunate enough to still continue to work for the company that I was originally employed with in New York, so I can work remotely. So that is a solution for folks, is coming up with work areas where folks can have an entrepreneurial spirit would have, so the town could encourage sort of a Silicon Valley feel, where you have a place that's beautiful to live and you have a collection of intelligent people. You have people who want to invest money, and you could create businesses and jobs from that environment.
I agree with you, Andrew, and this is Tim speaking. And what I will add to your comment is, I think that this, if there is a silver lining from this COVID-19 threat, it is in fact the realization that of the power of telecommunications. And the fact is that businesses we have reason to believe that major employers are thinking, giving lots of thought to the idea of keeping their employees at home, working from home. And so, and this has, even after the COVID threat has been solved with inoculation. So the issue here becomes, how can, if we have location working for us, we have a great environment working for us, it seems to me what we need to invest in is the infrastructure so that people can work from home, can come here and possibly have a home office, or even an office in an office park, if you will, but have the tools available to them so that they can compete in the world market. And I just know for myself, living off of Pilot Town Road, that the cell communication network is highly unreliable. And from the fact that you cannot see my face during this meeting tonight is a result of bandwidth problems. So we have a problem here and we need to address it.
I think the difficult thing is that for the most part, this area is a service economy. And so it's really going to take a hit here in the next couple of months as companies discover whether or not they can make it. And once that is settled, I think then we'll really see where we are. We certainly have great schools.
Right.
It's a great place to raise kids. The question is, can you afford to live here, housing-wise? It's very difficult to legislate any of this. Certainly, there's lobbying to be done for, say, economic development to try and get companies to open in our area. The western part of the county certainly has room for large, say, buildings for employers, but I don't know how you legislate it other than lobbying for it.
We're
A community of diversity.
We're getting
I'm sorry.
close to the end of our Q&A time. I'm looking for a good question here for the end. How about this one? Do you think there should be term limits on council members so that we can have periodic infusions of new blood?
Huh. You know, but I'll speak to that first, please, if you don't mind.
Yes, Tim.
The way I will answer it is this. I want to remind the community that this is the first election, the first competitive election in 6 years. The theory of term limits is something that it has a certain appeal, but the fact of the matter is that we have to have members of the community who are willing to step up, throw their hat in the ring, and run for competitive offices. And our community, unfortunately, does not celebrate that type of activism. And a more recent example, not only 6 years ago, we've had a drought of a non-competitive race for council, but even more recently, the BPW had an election just this spring, and no one threw his or her hat in the ring. And so 2 incumbents stepped up and were what I call refreshed. They were renewed and they were given another term to serve. But again, we did not have a choice. And so it's incumbent upon everyone to, you know, we all have a piece of this game, so to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Here's a good question that might be good for the end. To all panelists from Rod and Melanie in Pilot Town Village, what do you think is the biggest challenge facing Lewis?
Oh, wow.
I'll go first. I think obviously there's two, I think of it in 2 ways, which is an immediate effect, which is getting our businesses up and going again. That's a huge challenge. And I think it rests, frankly, with us as townspeople to help that along and make sure that we are frequenting our local establishments and being supportive of them in ways outside of spending your money directly in their establishments, perhaps. In addition to that, I should say. And then the second would be what we touched on, dealing with the environment and how that meshes with the obvious thing that there is going to continue to be development here because it's an attractive place. We don't want to shut folks out. We're not going to be those people that close the gate behind us. So that to me would be the longer term issue that we need to sort out, which is the environment, and the immediate being the local economy.
Everybody else?
Yeah,
Anybody?
I'll take a shot here. I agree that, Andrew, with opening up the economy in Lewis is a high priority. Just another high priority in my mind is resolving the dispute between BPW and the city. And as it relates to the economy opening up, this council has, well, thank you to Betsy Reamer for getting the retail people, all the people that have businesses in Lewis together. And they're coming forward with recommendations to council, and council has been incredibly supportive of all those recommendations. And keep them coming, guys, and we'll work with you and try everything we can to open up the economy.
I'll take a shot at it in the sense that, while I agree with what's been said, one of our biggest challenges in the future is what the impact of the growth of Eastern Shore part of Sussex County is going to have on our community. If we're not careful, and if we can't work with Sussex County, we're going to be strangled as more and more developments take place along Kings Highway, along Gills Neck Road, along New Road, and along Route 1. So that's going to be an issue that is constantly nagging at the council and our citizenry, I think, in addition to what's already been said. Thank you.
In addition to what's already been said, I will say for a hard goal, I will say a resiliency plan is going to be one of the most important things we can do. I would say on a softer goal, I think we need to be treating each other better. I think a lot of charm is gone. I think there's a lot of anger and hostility and suspicion, and it makes me sad. And I think the only way to get rid of that is to treat people better, treat people with respect, and be out in the open with everything we possibly can.
Very
Anyone
well
else?
said. Very well said, Kay. I could hardly say it better. In fact, I can't say it better. I was going to add, I would encourage us all to get out of our comfort zone and comfort zones. And what I mean by that is the ability to, instead of building fences and walls around our lives and containing everything within, actually get to know your neighbors, spend time with your neighbors. We're a community with many senior citizens, and as they age in place, they tend to become more and more isolated. And if we can expend that energy, it makes for a better community. I think that's a very large challenge in this community. I also agree that the restarting the businesses here in town that have suffered so badly, so adversely from this, the COVID, is huge. It's a huge challenge for everyone. And I hope that we are able to establish a new normal soon. Thank you.
Oh, we're out of time for questions. Thank you, panelists, and thank you all of the audience for your attention this evening and for your civic involvement. At this time, we'll give every candidate a chance to have a 1-minute final closing statement. This time we'll go reverse alphabetical order and start with Andrew.
Okay. Thank you, Amy. And again, thanks to the Greater Lewis Coalition for putting this together. It was, I think, useful for everyone. I think as a community and as candidates to see what the issues are and allow us to air those. So I appreciate that. Thank you also to the audience that participated and took their time out on a Friday evening to join this. I appreciate that not all of the questions were addressed, and there are many sort of opportunities out there for Lewis. So, again, we'll have more opportunities to discuss these as we continue to campaign. And I'd invite folks to connect with me. I have a website, which is simple. It's andrewforlewis.com. So you can find my phone number on there. Please feel free to call me. I want to be open and available to you. And I'll also be hosting some Thursday Zoom meetings coming up through the rest of the campaign as well. And those will be found on my website. The link will be there as well. So feel free to connect with me that way. I look forward to hearing from all of you. Thank you.
Next would be Tim.
Thank you very much. I would like to, of course, extend my thanks to the GLCC for this opportunity. I also want to thank the four candidates who have made this a really interesting experience for me. I have never run for public office before, and it's been fun, it's been challenging, and I'm glad to have been a part of this. I also want to thank the panelists who submitted their questions, and I hope that we've done a good job answering your questions. The last thing I will say is that I believe in the power of vote. I believe that we as citizens in this wonderful little town owe it to ourselves to make sure that we are registered and make sure that we participate by voting. And we do have the opportunity this year. I would like to remind everyone that absentee voting is encouraged, and it's encouraged from the very top level of state government. And it is, in effect, what we had the benefit of doing. This is a new and wonderful thing. We can do mail-in voting under the guise of calling it absentee balloting. So I would encourage everyone to take advantage of this opportunity and vote. Thank you.
Okay, I guess it's my turn, Amy. And again, I'd like to thank the GLCC for providing this forum for everyone. And I'd also like to thank the participants in the audience for their thoughtful questions. And I'd like to add that my experience on council, combined with my professional background and my demonstrated commitment to the city, qualify me for re-election. If re-elected, I assure you I will continue to work diligently for you, the citizens, to do what is in the best interest of our wonderful city of Lewis. I would appreciate your vote on July 18. Good evening.
Thank you. Kay?
I'm grateful for the chance to address many people and hear what the voters think is most important. I look forward to continuing the conversation, so please contact me with any comments and questions. carnahanforlewis@gmail.com, and that's FOR. I believe we are ready for change, to communicate openly and clearly, to reduce the number of executive sessions, to solve the city BPW lawsuit, to help create and implement a city resiliency plan, to make confident, positive, inclusive decisions that will make Lewis a leader in our state. My experience of 19 years as an LPC member and officer makes me a leader and uniquely qualified for the position. I am prepared to take up the duties of. On July 18th, voters can choose candidates. Please make one vote for me, Kay Carnahan. Thank you.
Thank you. Fred?
I want to thank the coalition for this opportunity. And the one thing I've learned early in my tenure on council is that many of the issues that council has to deal with are much more complex than they appear initially. The decision-making process is thorough and time-consuming, and the council must work within the constraints of our charter, our ordinances, and the laws of the state, while seeking input from our commissions and the public, keeping a broad perspective and trying to avoid unintended consequences. Serving on council is an awesome responsibility, and I take that responsibility seriously. There is still a lot of work to be done on issues before council today, and I'm asking for your vote that I might participate in bringing closure to these issues. I believe experience matters. And thank you very much, and stay well.
Thank you, candidates, for a very civilized and informative session. And thank you, everyone, for your dozens of questions and I think several hundred attendees. Now, the only thing left to do is to add this date to your calendar and that's the voting date, Saturday, July 18th. If you're not registered, you have another chance. You can go to City Hall in person by July 3rd at 4 o'clock and register to vote, or you can contact them to get an absentee ballot. Just today, 400 absentee ballots were mailed out by the city. So thanks again, and good night to everyone.